Hi there, and welcome to this week's edition of Marks of Maturity. Have you ever found yourself in a conversation with a family member or a friend or a coworker, perhaps another student, where you recognize that their value system, the way that they understand the world and who they are in it, is simply different than yours? I know I've found that to be true a bunch of different times, and I suppose that's part of simply being human and living your life. But I've also noticed that the culture and society around us is increasingly combative and even antagonistic towards those who follow Jesus. I'm not talking about persecution. I'm simply talking about worldviews that don't jive. They don't mesh up. And then we find ourselves having really challenging conversations, and we notice that there's a greater sense of separation and distance between us and some of the people that we know and love and care about. So what do we do about that? How do we have better conversations as followers of Jesus? Paul writes in Colossians chapter 4, verses 5 and 6, "Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." I love this instruction that Paul gives us. I love that he compels us to not retreat, but rather to engage with the people that we know and love and care about. Make the most of every opportunity. Don't be shy. Now, I know some of us are more introverted than others or more reserved than others, and that's okay. That's part of how you're made. And yet, make the most of every opportunity. Each of us has a gift and a story to tell, something to say to the people around us. So make the most of every opportunity. Honor that person. Treat them like you would like to be treated. But then it goes on to say, let your conversation be full of grace. And when I think about being full of grace, I think about being somebody who not only has received grace and believes fully and completely that I am aligned with God in a good way because of grace, that I am blessed as a result of that, but also an agent or an ambassador of grace, that I extend it to those around me, that I allow them the opportunity and the dignity of being free to hold their own viewpoint and to talk to me about it without me getting angry. That's difficult sometimes, but we're still called to honor that person and to extend grace. And yet we're also called to speak the truth. We're not supposed to gloss over the things that are out of line with what God desires for us. Paul writes, let your conversation be seasoned with salt. I love that imagery. I love the flavor of salt that salt preserves. But I would like to suggest that the salt could be the scriptures. Let your conversations be full of grace and seasoned with the scriptures. I'm not making a comment about the Greek. I'm making a theological statement that the scriptures can be salty in a good way. That when we have these conversations about things like sexuality, about different aspects in our society that are sometimes toxic, when we have these discussions, whether they're political or simply just different value systems colliding, and certainly abortion is one of those. How do we have a conversation about pro-life and pro-choice, about humanity, about when it is that we become somebody who is fully human in the eyes of God? How do we do that and let that conversation be seasoned with salt? To speak the truth, but to let it be done in a way that is gracious. And I'd like to suggest that the scriptures actually help us out here a lot. I know that sometimes people accuse conservative evangelicals of being Bible thumpers. Nobody likes to be called a Bible thumper. I believe that the scriptures are life-giving, not things that clobber people over the head. And so we come to a place like Psalm 139, beginning at verse 13, where it says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb." I'd even pause right there and simply say that, man, I'm so glad that I was knit together in my mother's womb. It tells me that God values me and he values you. You're human. And because you are human, because you're a person, you are made in the image of God. And that's a powerful idea. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. That sounds to me like God values you. That sounds to me like God values me. That sounds to me like God values every single person on the planet. And he values us right from the very beginning. There's not a place in Scripture that details out when a fetus becomes human. It just doesn't address it in those kinds of terms, but we hear the heartbeat of God. And so we can have that conversation. Perhaps I'm being too idealistic that others would want to hear all of what I just shared with you, but I believe that with relationship and with friendship and those kinds of things that we can have a different conversation than the media is feeding us. We can have a different conversation than political, opposites are trying to have with each other. And most of that's just a lot of noise. I believe that we can have life-giving, good conversations seasoned with the Scriptures, seasoned with salt, full of grace. So make the most of every opportunity.